On December 14, 1999, in Palmdale, California, Boeing unveiled the aircraft that was supposed to return the company to dominance in the world of fighter aviation. Standing before the public was the X-32, an imposing white machine with a broad delta wing and a gigantic air intake beneath its nose. It looked almost defiant, as if it had no intention of pleasing pilots, journalists, or fans of aviation aesthetics. But beneath that awkward appearance was a bet on a contract capable of defining the future of aviation for decades to come. Boeing's X-32 was answered by Lockheed Martin's X-35, which the command considered more elegant and more convincing in its presentations, ultimately declaring it the winner of the JSF program. In today's video, we'll try to figure out whether the X-32 was truly worse than the X-35, or whether it became a vivid example of how an impressive demonstration defeated engineering rationality. To understand the X-32, we first need to realize just how strange of a task the Pentagon handed to the aviation industry in the 1990s. After the end of the Cold War, the United States no longer wanted to maintain an entire zoo of dinosaurs in the form of highly specialized combat aircraft for every service and every mission. The Air Force had the General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon and the Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II. The Navy had its carrier-based McDonnell Douglas F-A-18 Hornets. The Marine Corps had its own McDonnell Douglas Boeing AV-8B Harrier II V-STOL aircraft. All of these machines were aging, and each required its own logistics, training, maintenance, spare parts, and a whole series of modernization programs. That's why the idea of the Joint Strike Fighter looked especially tempting at the time, with its promise to replace several different aircraft types at once with one common family of fighters. Even more so because the JSF's parts commonality was supposed to exceed 70%, which would completely break the half-joking Augustine's Law, according to which the cost of new combat aircraft rises so quickly that by 2054, the entire U.S. defense budget would be able to buy only one tactical aircraft shared between the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. On paper, it all sounded almost perfect. One stealthy multi-role fighter, three main versions, shared systems and production base, and lower operating costs across the board. But in reality, this idea was a real minefield for engineers. The U.S. Air Force needed a relatively light strike fighter with conventional takeoff and landing. The U.S. Navy required an aircraft capable of surviving carrier landings with reinforced landing gear, good low-speed handling, and aerodynamics suitable for carrier approaches. The Marine Corps, meanwhile, needed a STOVL, short takeoff and vertical landing variant, capable of taking off from a short runway or ship deck and landing vertically. Forcing all of this into a single program meant an inevitable collision of compromises between fighter weight, thrust, internal volume, stealth, and cost. But the lion's share of the problems came specifically from the STOVL version. By the end of the 1990s, only two finalists remained, Boeing with its X-32 prototype and Lockheed Martin with the X-35. In a sense, this was a clash between two completely different philosophies. Lockheed bet on more traditional aerodynamics, strong flight performance, and a complex but extremely impressive vertical lift system using a lift fan developed with help from Rolls-Royce. Boeing's engineers, meanwhile, tried to simplify the aircraft as much as possible, and instead of using a complicated system with a separate fan, the X-32 used the concept of direct thrust deflection. The idea was to avoid extra mechanisms, reduce fighter weight, and make the design as cheap as possible to produce and operate. That's why the X-32's fuselage and delta wing were built as a set of large one-piece composite panels under the principle of fewer joints equals fewer gaps equals lower labor intensity, which also meant lower serial production costs and reduced radar visibility. Of course, manufacturing such a tricky wing did not come without additional complications, but in return it provided limited transonic drag and a good angle for mounting a conformal antenna on the wing. And that huge, ugly X-32 air intake didn't appear because Boeing's designers had suddenly lost all sense of taste. Where Lockheed proposed an entire mechanical spectacle made of a shaft, clutch, gearbox, Rolls-Royce lift fan, and swiveling rear nozzle, Boeing responded with the straightforward logic of direct lift. One engine, one huge intake, one stream of thrust that went backward in normal flight and, during the transition to vertical landing, was redirected downward through lift nozzles. This was not exactly a primitive system either, but it looked incomparably simpler than the competitor solution. Less separate machinery and less dead weight in horizontal flight, while being far cheaper to manufacture and maintain. The main problem was that the lift fan gave Lockheed's aircraft more cold lifting thrust, while the X-32 relied almost entirely on the hot jet exhaust of the main engine. This led to limitations in thrust margin, temperature, and the risk of gas recirculation, where hot engine exhaust could be sucked back into the air intake, reducing thrust and creating thermal issues. This was especially critical near the ground, where thrust and temperature margins became a matter of safety. By the time the Demonstrator was presented in December 1999, the 5,500 people in attendance were quite surprised when, instead of just one X-32A, the team also rolled out the X-32B. In effect, Boeing wanted to demonstrate not only a new aircraft, but also a new way of creating it. What was especially impressive was that the Stovall version, the X-32B, had started construction 6 months later than the X-32A, yet work on it was completed just 6 weeks after the first Demonstrator. The company explained this insane pace through digital design, 3D modeling, simplified assembly, and a minimal amount of special tooling. It would not be an exaggeration to say that in the winter of 1999, the United States stood on the threshold of an entirely different production culture, one in which a future fifth-generation fighter could be produced faster, more rationally, and at a lower cost. The X-32A first took to the air on September 18, 2000, flying from Boeing's plant in Palmdale to Edwards Air Force Base. Over 4 months, it completed 66 flights and logged 50.4 flight hours, fewer than the initially planned around 100 hours, but enough to complete the government objectives for conventional takeoff and landing, supersonic flight, aerial refueling, operation with an internal weapons bay, and carrier-style operations. The last point was critically important because the X-32A didn't land aboard an aircraft carrier, but it did conduct an FCLP, Field Carrier Landing Practice program, simulating approaches to the outline of a carrier deck painted on a runway. In the end, Boeing reported 97 approaches and 74 touch-and-go landings, proving that the same Demonstrator could meet both Air Force requirements and the Navy's low-speed carrier approach requirements. The Stovall prototype, the X-32B, also looked quite successful. It first flew on March 29, 2001, performed hovers and vertical landings in June, and exceeded the speed of sound for the first time on July 17th. On July 28th, Boeing completed the program with an impressive series of flights: short takeoff, transition into conventional flight, supersonic flight, return to Stovall mode, and a slow landing. But this was where the weakness of the direct lift concept became visible. The X-32B demonstrated all the required elements, but not as cleanly as its competitor, Lockheed's X-35. For Stovall flights, Boeing had to fight for every pound of weight and every percentage point of thrust margin, even removing part of the air intake fairing and landing gear doors, which of course no longer looked to U.S. Command like the convenient all-in-one configuration they wanted to see in a future production fighter. Soon, Lockheed Martin delivered perhaps the strongest media and technical blow against the X-32 when, in July 2001, the X-35B performed the famous Mission X, a short takeoff transition from Stovall to conventional flight, climb to 25,000 feet, acceleration to Mach 1.05, transition back, hover, and vertical landing. The main weapon wasn't even the numbers, but the continuity of the demonstration. The X-35B showed all of this within a single flight and in one configuration, without ground conversion between vertical and supersonic aircraft. For the commission, this became almost ideal visual proof that the lift fan worked exactly the way they wanted it to work on the future production aircraft. Another blow to trust in Boeing was the fact that the X-32 Demonstrator didn't fully match the potential production F-32 that the company planned to propose in the final stage. The team gradually moved toward a more traditional configuration with tail surfaces because the original tailless Delta design created limitations for future requirements related to handling and carrier operations. There was nothing criminal about this. Demonstrators often differ significantly from production aircraft. But it was certainly not the best decision by Boeing in a competition where the customer was not choosing an experimental aircraft, but an aerial platform that would become the foundation of a massive international program. So compared to the X-32, Lockheed's X-35 was perceived as being closer to the future production F-35, while Boeing openly and honestly admitted that its Demonstrator differed from the production model. The question, was the X-32 worse, can't be reduced to a single sentence. As a flying demonstrator, it was excellent. According to some accounts, the X-32's handling during approaches simulating carrier landings was simply outstanding. JSF test pilot Philip "Rowdy" Yates, who'd flown hundreds of hours on the F-14 and FA-18 and completed more than 300 aircraft carrier landings, said that flying the X-32 was one of the brightest moments of his career, adding that in terms of handling and simulated carrier approaches, the aircraft behaved with extreme precision and predictability. This strongly contrasts with the popular myth that the X-32 was literally an unsuccessful flying bathtub. But in the end, the customer was not choosing a beautiful prototype or a limited series aircraft. It was choosing a platform destined for decades of regular development, production measured in thousands of units, and service in many different U.S. allied countries. Where Lockheed offered a complex, familiar-looking, and more versatile prototype, Boeing emphasized a rational production philosophy and maximum affordability, which at the demonstrator stage looked less mature and, quite frankly, pushed many people away even with its appearance. At the same time, criticism of the X-32 for excessive compromises sounds ironic today against the background of the F-35's fate, the JSF winner, which became a hostage to its own universality. It's no secret that in the end, the requirements of the three U.S. services influenced one another so strongly that Lockheed's poor engineers had to make an enormous number of concessions. The influence of the F-35B vertical landing version is especially noticeable because the layout of the entire platform had to change around it. Specialists remain firmly convinced that STOVL requirements place the strongest limitations on the F-35's aerodynamics, internal volume, and structural weight. And here an uncomfortable question arises. Was Boeing really wrong when it tried to simplify the aircraft as much as possible? In essence, many of the questions and requirements that Boeing raised back in the late 1990s later began to haunt the F-35 in the 2010s, namely program cost growth, high price per flight hour, complexity of maintaining stealth coding, overloaded electronics and software, constant modernization delays caused by complexity, compromises created by vertical landing requirements. In other words, Lockheed was lucky enough to step on almost every rake that Boeing had tried so carefully to avoid back when it was creating its two demonstrators. The X-32 ended up in a strange role, officially a losing prototype. Unofficially, one of the loudest examples of how engineering logic can lose to politics and presentation, alongside the equally legendary YF-23 from Northrop, which lost to Lockheed's more familiar YF-22. And even though the F-35 became reality while the X-32 became a museum exhibit, the argument they had between them never disappeared. So what matters more for the combat aviation of the future, rationality or spectacle? What do you think? Be sure to tell us in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you soon!